How to Effectively Use a Classroom Whiteboard by Paul Wanyeki. Writing boards are what I commonly refer as default teaching and learning materials. They are commonly found in almost all classes. They come in various forms like blackboards, green boards, whiteboards, and even smartboards. The usage and purposes of black, green, and whiteboards are relatively the same. Usage of smartboard, which is slightly different, is explained in a different video. For the purpose of this video, whiteboard will be used to demonstrate how to use black, green, and whiteboard effectively during lesson delivery. By the end of this video, you should be able to 1. Explain the roles of the whiteboard during a lesson. 2. Organize the whiteboard during a lesson. 3. Use the tips of using a whiteboard while delivering a lesson. A question begs, why do we need to learn how to use a whiteboard? One is that a whiteboard is a key tool for teachers to master if they are to be effective as teachers. 2, a whiteboard also allows teachers to give students visual information, while at the same time give the information a verbal effect and even incorporate kinesthetic effects. Worth noting is, not using the whiteboard effectively negates the whole purpose of the whiteboard. Now I'll address objective number 1, the role of the whiteboard. The first role is that it helps teachers and students to organize their ideas and express them as well. 2 is that it provides students with a visual effect. As we speak to the students, we are providing them with verbal information. And writing the same on the board augment the verbal information with visual information. The third point is that the whiteboard also allows us to better support students' different learning styles. There are 3 sensory preference learning styles. These are visual learning styles, audio learning styles, and kinesthetic learning styles. Visual sensory learners, these are learners who prefer learning by seeing. Whiteboard helps in visualizing information. On the other hand, audio or verbal sensory learners, these are learners who learn best by listening to information. Whiteboard allows room for verbal explanation of information or even discussions. Kinesthetic sensory learners, these are learners who learn best by doing. Whiteboards allows for dramatization of experience by allowing learners to use the whiteboard. This also makes the lesson student-centered. Edgar Dale advises that the more senses used during teaching and learning, the better the knowledge acquisition and knowledge transfer. Therefore, it is best practice for teachers to strike a balance between the 3 sensory learning preferences while using the board as a teaching and learning resource. The fourth function of the board is that it allows for step-by-step illustration of the procedure or processes of what is going on in a lesson. I'll demonstrate how a step-by-step process is achieved using the whiteboard. In this process, I will use the equation of motion of uniform acceleration. That is the derivation of equation of motion. Derivation of equation of motion. Now, we have said it allows for step-by-step illustrations. Now, while teaching student derivation of equation of motion, you can approach by first defining the variables that you'll use, and most preferably in a table. So you'll have a table. You can do freehand. When you do freehand, ensure that it is still neat. So in your freehand, and we are using a table here, we are going to neatly do our table, and one we say mass. Will be given by the symbol m. We say 2 is initial velocity, which will be given the symbol u. 3, we have the final velocity being given the symbol v. We have time being given the symbol t. And lastly, we'll have uniform acceleration being given the symbol a. Then we can clean the part that we don't need. Now you see, these are the step-by-step procedure that we are referring to. Now, from there now you can take the student to the next step. This is the first step of identifying the variable. The second step is by saying that we know that acceleration A equals to change in velocity over time taken. Change in velocity, now this is the second step. So you can even give it and say this is Roman 1. You can see it allows you even to label your steps. Then now you can say this equals to change in velocity, that is final velocity minus initial velocity over time taken equals to acceleration. That is step number 2. The third step is that you make V the subject of the formula. So you can say by cross multiplication, you'll get AT equals to V minus U. Making V the subject, V equals to, we take U the other side, it becomes addition, U plus A T. And that is our final, formula. Now, class, you can see that's how we can use it for step-by-step illustration. It also allows the teacher to emphasize key points throughout a lesson. Now, you can emphasize key points throughout a lesson, 1, by either using symbols, or 2, by using a marker pen of different color. For example, here, I can put this one in a symbol that is a rectangle. So I'm emphasizing and telling my students that the last point or that formula is key and needs to be acquired. Also, It allows the teacher to focus students on the key points to be memorized. You can be able now to focus the students on the key points that you want to memorize them by constantly referring them back to the key points that you want the students to memorize during the lesson. Also, during focusing the point, you can be able also still to underline to be able to focus the point. Also, focus students on the key points to be memorized. Also, it gives room for the lessons to be interactive by allowing students' involvement to interactively and collaboratively use the whiteboard. Lastly, whiteboard is used to augment other educational resources like PowerPoint, projectors, slides. Now I'll move to the second objective, which is organizing your whiteboard. I am going to take you through how I organize my whiteboard. I have learned this through experience and role modeling from experienced teachers. There are no laws governing whiteboard organization. What I'm going to present are tested best practices. Important to note is that not organizing the board negates the function of the board. So we are going to look at the whiteboard organization tips. To use the whiteboard effectively, you need 1, a marker pen of different colors. As you can see, I have marker pen of different colors. You need cleaner, that's a cleaning agent, and also you need an eraser. If you are using a big whiteboard, have it divided into sections. The number of divisions will be dictated by the size of your whiteboard. Whiteboard divisions have a section for objectives and homework or assignments. Have a section identified for noting down the new words. Have an area identified for noting down key formulas. And also have a section or a space for brainstorming session. This is the working space for students and recording discussion, findings, and student answers. The third tip is that have objectives of the lesson displayed throughout the lesson. This is to act as constant reminder to the teacher and the students of what to expect of them. I'm going to demonstrate that. First is that we should work with a clean board. A clean board allows the teacher to minimize distractions to the students. So, as I've said, the divisions of your board depends on how big your board is. For example, with my board, I'm going to divide it into 3 sections. Now, this is the section for objectives. We'll have our objectives here. We'll have our objectives there, and we number our objectives. 1, 2, 3. Now, the section below the objective, we use it for homework or assignments. Homework. We use it for homework or assignments. Now, in most cases, the assignments that are given during the lesson is what is recorded here, because you want the assignments to run throughout this lesson so that the students can take them home. Now, the middle section is what we use for working. This is our working space. Working space. This is our working space. Now, all our working space are done here. Now, since my board is relatively small, I can also use this working space as brainstorming space, so that as the students will be brainstorming, we rub what they have written or we rub what we have used during brainstorming session. Now, this section here is what we use to write the new words. new words. Now, this is now for the purposes of focusing the students to the lesson. We write here new words, and at the same time, we can use it to write formulas and statements. We can use to write formulas and key statements. Like from the previous example that we did, you can write here velocity. Velocity as the new word. So this is how we organize the board. I repeat, we have objectives here that runs throughout the lesson. We have also homework that runs throughout the lesson. Then the middle section is working session, and also it can double up as brainstorming section. Then this section, we use it to write new words, formulas, and key statements that you need the students to recall. Also, as the lesson is proceeding, mark or check the objective after establishing it has been achieved. This allows the teacher to conduct formative checks and ensure everybody is following. Now, we mark by after you have conducted formative check and everybody is on board, you mark that objective number 1 is achieved, and you tell the students, now we are moving to objective number 2. Also, make sure your whiteboard is clean and ensure your whiteboard markers are working. Also, print, don't write. I'm going to demonstrate that. Print, don't write. Now, writing is when you do it in cursive. For example, I'll say working space. That is my writing. Truly not very legible. We are supposed to print. Printing, I'll say working space. Working space. Also, as you are writing, give your writing verbal effect, because we have said we have the visual learners and the audio learners. So as you are writing, giving it verbal effect, I'm going to demonstrate that. You give verbal effect by pronouncing the words as you are writing. Working space. Next is that print large enough to be seen from the back of the classroom. Print large enough to be seen from the back of the classroom. Also, don't turn your back on the class as you are writing. That is very important. Avoid what we call having a great conversation with the board. First thing is that avoid explaining points to the board. Always explain your points while facing the students. Finish writing your points, then turn and face your students, then explain your points. 2 is that when you are writing on the board, try to position yourself in a position where you will be able to maintain facial or eye contact with your students. Don't give the back to the students like this. Always try to face your student. There are 2 techniques that you can use. One is that stand on your right while writing, so that you can be able to, by just turning your head slightly, you can be able to face the students. Now, I'll do writing while standing on my right. For example, I'll say here, working space. Space. You can see I'm completely not giving my students my back, but I'm able to somehow maintain eye contact. The second advantage is that it exposes what I'm writing. I'm not blocking what I'm writing. It exposes what I'm writing. Now, this technique is slightly difficult for left-handed teachers, because for left-handed teachers, They will be completely showing the students their back. However, they can still do it by slightly turning their head and still stealing a glance. I'll not be able to demonstrate that because naturally I'm not left-handed. Also for the left-handed lecturers or teachers, they can stand on their left. They can stand on their left as they are writing. Now, the slight disadvantage that they have is that when they are writing from the left, as you can see, their hand is blocking what they are writing. Their hand is blocking what they are writing. And as I said from the beginning, we don't have a law governing writing on the board, but best practices that work is what I am teaching today. Write horizontally and not at an angle. In most cases, especially for teachers, you'll find out that as you are writing, your writings moves vertical or at an angle. Working space at an angle. Avoid this because this implies that the students have to turn their head so that they read. We want to focus all the energies of the student towards acquisition of knowledge and not trying to figure out what you have written on the board. So always try to write horizontally like this. Working space. Working space. Also, don't clean the board with your bare hand. Always use an eraser. Lastly but not least, leave the board clean. Always leave your board clean. Thank you. Join me in the next lesson.